welcome to the first episode of the I.D.E.A Dialogues. The Different Strokes is happy to bring this to you. These are conversations with leaders on what inclusion, diversity, equity, and accountability mean to them and their organizations. Today's conversation is very, very special. Special because it is our first, and it is our first with a Tata Group company, an organization known for its Indian value systems. Titan Company Limited, a brand that touches every home in India, a brand that focuses on doing the right thing, the Titan of industry inclusion in India. I can't wait to get this dialogue started. So let me introduce you all to Sanchita Ghosh, Head Inclusion and Belonging, Titan, a DI and care sector leader, driving impact at the intersection of business, people, and policy. Sanchita, welcome to this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vani.
When we spoke a few weeks back, and as we were discussing what we'd cover, what struck me most was that you didn't essentially come into this role from the corporate sector. You came from the community sector, working with the community. So, how does this whole thing pan out for you and the organization?
So, Ani, I started my career in sales and marketing. And soon after, I sort of pivoted to the development sector. And it was very interesting because in the work that I do, which is behavior change, I got a chance to look at India not through markets or segments, but I got a chance to sort of look at families, understand the arcs of their life, look at the communities, the connectedness, the interdependencies, and I think that is what has really shifted the way I look at any work which is around inclusion, because I truly believe that inclusion is not about working with individuals in isolation, but working together with communities. And so coming back to corporate sector wasn't really planned. It was just pure chance. I landed up here, and then I figured that I could possibly use that same community lens when I'm looking at people and teams within an organization. So it's been interesting and a very, very challenging journey as well, because while you're bringing in a lot of these principles of community development, how do you truly then apply in an organization? So far, so good.
Awesome. It's interesting that you say, inclusion for you personally begins at the community level, and you're very, very lucky if you've found a foothold with an organization that looks at it with the same lens. Can we expand a little on now how this comes to life within Titan?
I mean, to your point, I think I do feel incredibly delighted and grateful to be with an organization with which I share the same purpose, the same values, because that's very, very important for an individual like me to thrive, which allows you that uninhibited thinking and doing in this space. How that comes alive in Titan is very interesting, because Titan is a very distinctly Indian company, and the value system, the culture is very strongly coded into us. That's the way we live in our everyday lives, right? And what are those some of those values? They are interdependence, it is community well-being, it is trust, it is care, it is dignity, which is very, very interesting to Titan. Now, if I were to kind of refer back, we had Jamshedji Tata, who possibly introduced the concept of creche nearly about 145 years ago, when workplace inclusion wasn't really a conversation. He brought in Provident Fund and Pension Fund about 120 years ago. Now, he clearly thought that community welfare or community well-being is so central to the health of an organization. And I do remember there was this quote which we often refer to in all our presentations, where he said that in a free enterprise, community is not just a stakeholder, but it is the sheer purpose of its existence, which essentially means that what are we doing business for? It is for communities to benefit. It is, of course, naturally creating wealth. But I think the route that we take to create that wealth or to create that impact becomes so, so important. And that, I guess, is rooted in the way in which we live in India, which are those through, some of those values which I talked about. So I think that's, and I guess Titan is just hardwired to kind of live on those values. I think it's just intrinsically a part of our DNA.
It's interesting, 130 years back, Krish. I mean, we didn't even, I don't think the concept of being strategic, organizationally strategic about inclusion and diversity even existed those days. And that's like also, I think, the way, like you said, it's an Indian way of life, right? We are essentially anchored in our society. We are essentially anchored in the family structure.
Yeah.
And even if you visit a India workplace, it's that sense of bond that gets created, right? That's what is
Yeah.
impacting
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
retention ultimately. So from what I hear you say, typically when you look at it with a standard corporate lens, we look at it the individual. How do we retain this individual?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
speaking at it from the individual perspective, but we're taking it the other way. So for you, inclusion begins in the external world.
Yeah.
How do we elaborate on that?
Of course, I think the lot of the work that we do, and also if you look at the existing structures and the value system of an Indian society, has to do a lot about the community. A lot of what we do has to flow from the community, seep into a family, and then reach an individual. I mean, of course, it can be vice versa as well. But we have realized that you cannot look at an individual in isolation and try to make a change. That defeats the purpose of inclusion, because there is only so much that you can do with an individual. But when the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion is embedded in a community, there are far-reaching impact, which therefore also makes business sense, because when a community is protected and is well taken care of, naturally the impact and the business value will grow over a period of time.
And how do you look at this? I mean, can you share some examples of uh, how you look at persons? Let's take the very standard I&D segments. How do you differentiate between focusing on an individual with a particular from a diverse segment to an overall approach?
So I'll give you a couple of examples. And a simple one could be that if you look at the medical coverage that we have for our employees, we consider families at large. And when I say families, we have broken free of traditional family structures. Now we have a medical coverage which looks at all kinds of family structures. It could be a heterosexual couple, it could be a same-sex couple, it could be couples and live-in relationships. It could also mean taking care of pet insurance. We honor every form of family structure within the organization. That is number one. Number two, we also, give a lot of importance to intensive caregiving needs, which can arise in case of, let's say, an employee who has a child with disability. We recognize that the intensive needs are very, very intensive, and therefore they need to be supported equitably. So we bring in policies around that space. What we also do is that we look at encouraging the next generation, of our employees to join our workforce. So we do bring around policies and encourage the next generation of our existing employees to join our organization.
Okay.
Because and that is what really builds that feeling of community, which you will see in all other legacy organizations within the Tata Group.
So it's a quality versus quantity
Yeah.
kind of aspect.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is because, um, how much can you run after metrics and targets and boxes to tick? But there are so many qualitative aspects, such as, trust, compassion, empathy, belongingness. I don't know even if it's possible to put a number on that, right? There is
Mm-hmm.
only so much that a dashboard and a program or an initiative can do, but there is so much more to inclusion than playing with numbers, which I think we have all got very used to.
Sorry, it's the behavioral aspect, right? What is it that you experience?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
the small gestures of care which would probably
yeah.
go unnoticed otherwise. So when you're creating these uh, structures of support, caregiver support, supporting families with, of employees with who have children with disabilities and so on, is that then does that kind of become universally applicable to everybody, or is it something that you just naturally do for an employee who has a need and therefore is expressing it?
It's interesting that you ask this question. Um, and it could be a chicken and egg situation. A lot of people want to wait till you have an employee with
Correct.
disability
Yeah.
and then set systems. And there's no
And
right or
that's
wrong.
the way the numbers in the budget planning
Yeah,
typically comes
yeah,
in, right?
right,
Yeah,
right. So
yeah.
there is no right or wrong in it. But having said that, I think within Titan, we have a culture of care and dignity, which essentially means that even if there is one person who needs an accommodation, we do not look at a budget or an ROI. We just make it happen because it's just the right thing to do.
Okay.
Now, if that accommodation happens to benefit someone else, it's a bonus for us. So we don't go back to looking at, whether it's going to make sense, what are the other people doing. Uh, we are not an organization which looks left, right, and then decides on a policy or a
Hmm.
practice. And I think that fundamentally, therefore, determines the course and the journey we charter in this space.
Very, very, very interesting and a very different take on inclusion, I must say. I mean, it's an eye opener because when you look at what's happening today, when you look at the media, when you look at what we're getting, right, your processes, etc., which are all measurement driven, metric driven, setting goals, etc. These are, is it fair to say that these are influences from the Western world that are penetrating, and we move from focusing on the human to yet another metric or number? Is that fair? And what are the benefits you see that are also coming in from that lens? Because everything has shades of gray in it, right?
Yeah, so when you're referring to the West or any other region, I think regional practices will have its own merits and will have its own, the good parts to look at. So there is no right or wrong to it. But for Indian companies, it becomes very important to introspect and see where, what you are rooted in, what are your own values, and then look at what is it that you can then imbibe from these external influences. Uh, the Western world perhaps is very, very good in structuring, articulating,
Correct.
packaging this agenda in a way in which it can make it visible. Again, nothing wrong in it. And as a result, what they have managed to do is they have been able to programatize segments within inclusion. And then they have developed tools to measure and report and continuously look at improvement,
Hmm.
which is great. But I think what is very important for Indian companies to do is to know what your core values are, right? So inclusion is less about copying what others are doing. I think it has to do a lot about knowing who you are. Um, and I often say this: an elephant doesn't ask a bear how to walk, right? An elephant will find how to walk with its own weight and wisdom. So we have to figure out who we truly are, what are we rooted in, what are our values, and then determine the course of action.
What you just shared, right? When we're looking at it with the Asia Pacific lens, um, every country in the region has a very unique culture. Japan, very similar practices to India, for example, in many ways, but very different in some other ways. similarly, the West is kind of bringing us a lot of the tools, etc. So what I'm hearing you say is you got to take what's available,
Yeah,
customize it. The decision to use what you want when you want is yours, and then build that texture of culture which is so uniquely your own with the India lens, and also that of your organization,
sure.
right? Uh, there's also this notion that a culture also emanates a lot from the top,
Hmm.
right? So what is the role that at Titan you have your leaders play in um, taking this culture deeper, making this very organizationally universal?
Right. I don't think this agenda of inclusion is possible without the sponsorship and buy-in of the top leaders, and that largely comes from the trust that the leaders have been able to create with all the employees, rather all the stakeholders. And I think if you look at Titan, this trust has been built by leaders over 40 years. So while we have been innovators, disruptors, we have been a young and a restless organization when it comes to catering to different brand products, different set of consumers. But I think trust has been built over these many years by our leaders. Um, and I can give you a few examples to illustrate that. And that is also something which our MD believes in, which is, when the going gets tough, you
Mhm.
look to your family. And while we are a contemporary, competitive market leader, but we have a very fair, caring family which has been built. Now, who has built it? While, of course, everyone has a role to play, but I think a significant role is played by the leaders, and they have been able to demonstrate over a period of time what trust looks like. If you look at COVID times, when
Mhm.
it was the most emotionally and economically challenging journey, Titan navigated it without a single job cut, with pay assurance. And it was not just for employees. The organization believed that anyone who was dependent on Titan has to be held through those years. So, if you build that amount of trust in the ecosystem, naturally inclusion doesn't become a number, it's something which is felt. And it's very organic, it's something which is very human.
I've also heard about this, this concept of your leaders actually reaching the grassroots, right, to
Yeah.
learn more
Yeah.
by engaging with the people. I'd love to hear a little more about that.
Okay, so that's it's something called the Tell Me. It's a listening platform which has found itself as a Harvard case study now.
Okay.
But essentially, how it began was that our MD and our chief people officer. So we don't call we don't have a function called HR. We are not human resources. We have a people function. So we have a chief people officer. So our MD and CPO every year travel the length and breadth of India and also offshore and spend about 75 to 80 hours just meeting people and asking them how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it is amazing because they meet them not as bosses, but as fellow human beings. And what happens as a result is that, as bosses or as, the top leadership, they are not waiting for people to reach out to them. They reach out to their employees in the most human way possible and meet them where they are.
Okay.
And that has been such an excellent initiative which has allowed us to hear directly from the employees what are their concerns, what are their big wins, what are they celebrating, what are they disappointed about, and creating that space and culture of inclusion.
Okay, so the leaders go out, do these. It's awesome if a leader is traveling 82 odd days, traveling the length and breadth of the country and beyond to speak with people. And what happens with the learnings? How is that then picked and dropped?
So then after that, you sort of programatize that a little bit, because then you need to create those feedback loops, right? There has been a lot which has been shared. How will then those, action items be looked at? How will the closures be done? So, there is a program which has been structured around Tell Me, where the program office looks at all that has been,
Collected.
accumulated and collected and gathered through these 75, 80 hours. And then you sort of look at the parts that you can do something about, and then there are parts that which you can't help. But what we make sure is that the feedback loops are complete. We go back to the employee
That's
to
so
let them
important.
know
Yeah.
that yes, we can help you, yes, we are at it, and this has been done.
That's the most interesting thing about surveys, right? We often collect a lot of inputs and feedback from people. Um, Grand plans sometimes are made, but the individual in a remote corner of India probably sometimes never hears or feels that impact, and feeling that impact becomes so important. And we spoke particularly about the meeting employees, but your circle of influence, Titan's circle of influence is so wide. You're working with, you have manufacturing facilities. Beyond that, you have communities you work with, etc. So, um, can you tell us how you connect the dots with the extended world as well, the supply part of the
Yeah,
business?
yeah. So Titan, while you might just say we are a shareholder company, but we are a stakeholder company, which essentially means that we have a large number of stakeholders. And who are our stakeholders? We have vendors, we have suppliers, we have franchisees, business associates, we have employees, the communities that we touch. Um, Everyone who touches Titan is a Titan, is how we look at things, which essentially means then we definitely and most definitely have listening forums with each cohort to know what are the pain points, how can we make their lives better, how can business be made better, because if their lives are better, naturally the impact on business is going to be way
Yeah,
higher.
inclusion ultimately. I mean, end of
Right,
the day is about business outcome as well,
right.
right? Yeah.
So it's inclusion across the value chain, is how we look at it, and how we are improving their lives and productivity in every way. So for each of these cohorts, there are, not just listening forums, but also planned initiatives, a lot of, interventions to improve lives of anyone who is dependent on Titan in one way or the other.
I've heard about your Karigar program, your Meadow program, etc. Would you, um, expand on some of those,
Yeah.
bring those stories to life?
Yes. So we have in the vendor and the supplier community. There are three models that we operate with, and as you are aware, we have multiple divisions. If you look at a jewelry division, a watches division, and then if you look at saris and dress wear, which is known as the Naira brand. For jewelry, we have something called a Karigar Park. Now, if you look at the traditional jewelry industry, they had very, very unsafe working environments within which artisans used to operate, commonly known as karigars. But what Tanishq, the jewelry division, did was that create karigar parks, which provided uh, safe workspaces with fair labor practices, ensuring health and wellness of all the artisans who were working with us. And over a period of time, that grew into a fairly large enterprise where we were sort of making lives of karigars or artisans better in every way possible. Um, the Meadow project was sort of a sustainable social responsibility project where women from our affirmative action groups are part of this, and it's a fairly large number of women, 200 plus women who work with us. Again, creating a better workplace, fair labor practices, taking care of health and wellness for them to contribute to our business. Now, if I talk about Weavershala, which is by Tanera, uh, currently Tanera has about 18,000 weavers, out of which nearly 12,000 are women. And we have about 18 Weavershalas across the country. Again, we are creating ergonomically safe workplaces, which are economically beneficial, fair labor practices, taking care of health and wellness. Vision is very important for weavers, right? So what
Yeah.
Titan does is it takes care of eye health screening, it takes care of cataract surgeries. And among the Weaver community, we have the age group of 18 to 85 working with us. And what we were seeing is that the newer generations have not been willing to take up the intensive weaving process anymore because they do not find it economically beneficial. So how do you sort of create avenues and livelihoods and make it a profession that they would like to take, year on year?
Okay.
So it sort of, so then you have to really look at a systems approach for generations to sort of not just take up weaving or art or craft, but continue to also work with Titan.
And to flourish,
And
right?
to
Yeah,
flourish.
because
And to flourish.
when you look at it with the generational lens, they want to go out
Yes.
into the outside world. They probably want to build market, a setup. It's really lovely. So you say that because then, what you're saying is, if the community thrives, then everybody within that
Yeah.
community thrives, and ultimately, the organization thrives as well. Um, we spoke about women, so I'm going to pause you there and make a shift to the corporate world itself. And because one of the other conversations we had was around um, how are you impacting community, but with the hat of engaging them in practices within the corporate office setup, right? So you spoke about this program. You were telling me about this program where you're talking about uh, supporting women who want to return to work,
Yeah.
right? It's probably a good point to just elaborate on that.
Um, we often talk about the labor market shortage. We talk about talent becoming scarce. But the truth is, talent is not scarce. We've always had talent. Uh, but we have been looking at it rather through a very narrow lens.
Mm-hmm.
We have not looked at talent, which had huge potential, but those who are leaving the labor market. And
And for various
and
reasons,
for
again,
various
yeah.
reasons. And we figured that one cohort which really needed to be looked at are these very high potential women who are dropping out, when they are in their middle management
Correct.
due to multiple reasons. One is, of course, marriage, there is childcare, elderly care, and one of the biggest reasons why they are dropping out is also spousal relocation, where they choose their husband's career or the partner's career over theirs. And that's a huge loss, not just to an organization, potentially also to an individual and to an household. And that was the genesis of the idea of Sequel. And that's a returnship program. And we figured that, we possibly needed to look at it uh, not from a lens of what the others are doing in this space,
Correct.
but
Yeah.
how do we sort of meaningfully integrate this into our business. I'm not saying it has been easy. It has been very, very tough. Because when you have women on career break, and we cannot just rely on the transferable skills that they have picked up. Clearly, they are in certain functions which require them to upskill. But have we sort of brought them in a room and had those conversations? What are the self-limiting beliefs that exist? What are the barriers that they are truly feeling? Are there barriers that they feel, or those barriers truly exist? So we've started this program where we
Okay.
brought them together in a 3-day boot camp, the first batch of SQL participants in a boot camp. And I am just so delighted to tell you that while we were thinking there'll be so many dropouts and wondering how these women will even attend this 3-day boot camp and the challenges they might have at home of juggling priorities, there was 100% attendance. Everybody was in the room for 3 days. And what was amazing is that we were able to have such rich conversation,
Conversations.
which challenged us and it challenged them. For them to look at life or this new journey not as a catch up that they're playing with their peers, but more as a pivot, more as a re entry. And what is the choice they are making and what is the price they are going to pay. So I feel we are on a journey. It's going to be a slow burn. We are also learning from our experiences. Particularly because we are a non-tech company, there are certain limitations we have when we are operating in a non-tech space. It's a very eye contact profession that you are in. Hence, flexibility sometimes becomes an issue when you are in retail. But we're trying to figure out what the solve could look like.
Awesome. That's really very interesting because typically, yeah, you're right, right? The standard program is where you apply, there's a separate category of, you know, potential opportunities for
Yeah.
individuals returning to work. But end of the day, those 28 women who attended your session probably left with meaningful experiences, higher confidence, etc., right? Whether they get into ultimately Titan or not, they've gone away with uh, powerful personal tools,
Yes, and
which
I think additionally, going back to where we started, right? I think when we start with a community lens, I think women who are on a career break feel very isolated. But the moment we brought this batch
Mhm.
together, where all of them have been on a career break between 1 to 17 years, that sense of community is so powerful. And that's why I keep coming back to you. You know, individuals, when they come together as a community, can lift you out from the throes
True.
of, ultimate disappointment and whatever you're feeling. And building that community, I feel, has been the biggest achievement of this program. To be able to see another person and say, hey, I think you're going through the same thing that I am. And how do we then create these spaces, safe spaces to have these conversations? How do you create these communities, larger communities for their own voice and agency? That I think has been a big win for our program.
I mean, I'm just imagining and visualizing how that community would now have their own WhatsApp group where they're exchanging personal stories and, you know, supporting each other.
It's
Because then
buzzing.
you're kind of paying it forward already, even without
It's
having picked up
buzzing.
a
It's
job.
it's
Yeah.
they have now become their each other's cheerleaders. So if they've learned to kind of pick up on the LinkedIn, digital
Yeah.
presence. So if one is posting, the other one's going there and liking and commenting and pulling up the other one and saying, hey, you haven't posted yet. So that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's what
Absolutely.
community
Yeah.
does to each other, like
Yeah.
constantly pushing you.
Yeah. Given we are on this topic of communities, right? Titan products touch every home. You're
Oh.
touching the community at such a large scale. So, tell us a little bit about how you're touching the community through your retail experiences, through your advertising. They very soul stirring, right? Your advertising stands out for just churning those emotions like nothing else. So, tell us a little bit about what happens behind the scenes in these situations, contexts.
So diversity as an agenda. It is not an agenda. It's the reality for us, simply because if you look at our brands, we are 16 plus brands across
Okay.
5 divisions, right? And we believe that diversity of people will help us deliver diverse brands. We need diversity in thoughts, we need diversity in perspectives,
You need
backgrounds,
diversity in design, right? Yeah.
experiences. How else can we deliver diverse brands and the consumer experiences that we are offering in our retail stores? That's our reality, and that is something that we have to continuously focus on to be relevant in this very competitive world. Now, when you talk about advertising, uh, our organization Titan has been known for design differentiation in terms of the product categories that we operate in, and that has been the biggest strength that we operate with. So it is only natural that that differentiation you will see in advertising as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the messaging, what we say, uh, has to sort of reflect the aspirational consumer base that we have. So a lot of our messaging, let's say, I'll give you a few examples, and I'll refer to a very, very old advertisement. I know a lot of us may not find it relevant because it was from 2013, and it was a time when uh, Tanishq was, talking about uh, remarriage in 2013. While we're talking about differentiated product category in the wedding segment, in the wedding jewelry segment, we our advertising was about a caramel skinned woman, in her remarriage. I thought those are sort of messages that needed to be talked about, needed to be shared about, because there is no better way but to break stereotypes with the differentiated designs that you have. There was another campaign called, from Mia, This Is Me, which was about being unapologetically you, where we had, a model with Down syndrome, an MMA champion, and which talked about the choices we make. It talked about, the uniqueness amongst us, because, we have uniqueness in our offerings. And what better way to do it than showcase it through our inclusive campaigns and advertising?
Talking of advertising, which is your favorite ad? I mean, so many to call out there. You already alluded to a couple of them, but which is your personal favorite?
Okay, so I'll tell you two. One, which I just referred to, was
Yeah.
about the remarriage,
Yeah.
the jewelry campaign in 2013, which I just talked about. There's another one um, about, it's a boot camp campaign, which was released on Mother's Day. It's wonderful because it says that motherhood is a leadership skill. And I personally resonate with it a lot. And it also talks about a person returning to work after a career break. I thought it was very, very powerful. And that's something which is very close to my heart. Other than so many, we have so many campaigns. You have a Raga, which talks about women, the stereotypes, etc. So there's so many.
Interesting. Technology is, end of the day, in today's world, getting embedded into everything we do, right? You have a very strong wellness focus with many of your products. How do how are the tech how is tech coming to life in all these wellness initiatives that you run?
I think in today's world, if you don't talk about health and wellness, I think I'm missing the plot. So it was very natural for our products to also look at wellness, and not on a very superficial level, but I think very deeply. So if you look at our smart wearables, today we talk about proactive health management, right? So how do you sort of bring in preventive health through our smartwatches, vis-a-vis reactive, health management? So how do you look at product categories across different price points, look at different features, and make health management equitable, participatory for all kinds of consumers, regardless of the background, paying power, abilities? I think that has been something which has been critical to the success of our smart wearables category, and that's where we operate.
Awesome. And I love the fact that you speak about affordability,
Yes.
because a lot of the products are often unaffordable. And just given all that we spoke about, you're also weaving that back into employees or your franchisees or your extended community experiencing these products. So it's kind of an end-to-end 360-degree cycle.
Yes. I think health and wellness is such an important aspect of inclusion. And it's good that you brought up the fact about business associates and franchisees in a system. While at one level, the employees of our franchises are not our employees,
Correct.
but they are the ones who are delivering our consumer experience of a Tanishq or a Watches or Tanera. It became very important for the organization to also take care of them. So currently the organization takes care of their medical insurance, their preventive health checkup of 10,000 plus employees who are not even on our rolls. And that's a conscious effort that the organization has made towards the health and well-being of even those who are not on our rolls, but part of our ecosystem.
So Sanchita, tell me, it's a fascinating story of community, family, individual. If you have to sum up your philosophy in one or two lines, what would you say?
I think inclusion is not something that we talk about. I think it's about how we understand people. It's about doing the right thing when nobody's watching you, and nobody is going to clap for you. Nobody is going to validate your efforts. Nobody is going to visibilize your efforts. But you continue to do what is right.
I'm going to hold you there, and I'm digressing a little bit here. No, you're saying nobody is going to validate it, nobody is going to see it, experience it. But on the other side, end of the day, Titan is a business where you're employing people, you're touching consumers. There's so much activity out there in the world, right? That is visible, awards and recognitions and measurement tools and so on. So how do you cope with that dichotomy, right? You're not visible yet. In the last 40 minutes or so, we've heard so many interesting things, but the story is not out there. So what's it that enables you to keep it so personal that you have to experience it to know it?
You're going to get me in trouble, but I'm going to try nonetheless. Uh, so there are two parts to it. One, see, if being a retail organization, numbers come naturally to us. What gets measured gets done. But for diversity and inclusion, I think mindfully we are not looking at numbers, because how much can you measure in terms of you can measure representation, but I do believe personally that inclusion is something that you need to feel. It's so qualitative in nature. How much can you run behind numbers? That is number one. Number two, I think and my corporate communication team will hate me for saying this, but I'm going to say it nonetheless, which is our top leaders are not very active on social media, which is very good, because then nobody's looking at reposting, retweeting, and nobody's looking for optics, nobody's working towards visibility, nobody's working towards any sort of what the other person, other organizations are doing. So what happens is the conversations that we have internally on subject of diversity and inclusion, they are rich, they are debated thoroughly, they are challenged, and truly we are able to come up with solutions which work for us. And I think that helps. And that therefore also helps us stay away from lot of the lot of what is out there in the market, because our leaders are not looking for validation, they are not looking for a pat on the back. So that really helps.
Ultimately, whether you're out there and your leaders are telling the story or not, given you're touching every Indian home, the story is organically anyway going to reach a lot of people. So, what does the future look like for Titan?
We continue to do what we are good at, be it at business, be it product, be it services, be at caring for our people, creating that fair, caring, equitable family that we've always had. We're going to build on those principles. Being good is good for business, as our MD says, and that's just the right thing to do.
Talking of doing the right thing, I think I'm going to pull out Harish Bhatt's book, the latest that has hit the market, right? Um, it's unfortunate that we've lost a gem in the country with Ratan Tata, but the legacy he's left behind is so high. And I was reading this book, and one thing struck me about doing the right thing. And this whole conversation essentially has been around that. So it says Ratan Tata was asked about his legacy in the in house magazine of the Tata Group in December 2012. And here's what he said: I have been asked a question before, and I have always dodged it. That's because it is for others to decide what my legacy is, not me. The legacy I leave behind, that which I am aware of, that which I can express, is that I myself have lived by the principle that I have desired for the group. I have led by example in that sense, and I have devoted my life as best as I could to the welfare of the group. I have endeavored to do the best I could with the responsibilities I have had. I have always tried to do the right thing. So it's not surprising, really, is it, that the value system is so deeply entrenched in your organization as well, and your leaders are just emulating the behaviors that have been part of the Tata world for uh, decades together. Um, with that, I think Sanchita will wrap this up, but it's been a very interesting conversation. What you've done for us is pitched inclusion with a completely different lens of the Indianness of inclusion. We have so much in our culture, and I really value everything that you've said. And if we, as a community of Indians, can take this conceptually forward as inclusion being Indian, the world is our stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It was just such a meaningful, enriching conversation.